Good afternoon, Excellencies, distinguished guests and friends. It's an honor to stand before you today to discuss a topic of not just policy or economics, but a profound human right, that is universal energy access. As we gather here, amid rapid technological advancements and unprecedented economic growth, it's easy to forget that over 700 million people worldwide still lack access to electricity. This statistic isn't just a number. It's a stark reminder that our global progress is uneven and many are left behind. At the International Solar Alliance, we believe in the sun's power as a transformative force. Solar energy is not just abundant and renewable, it is also the most democratic form of energy. It can reach the most remote villages, light up the darkest corners of our world, and fuel the ambitions of millions. By harnessing this power, we can drive sustainable development, reduce poverty, and mitigate the impacts of climate change. But this mission cannot be accomplished in isolation. It requires a collective effort, a coalition of government, private sector partners, and civil society working together towards a common goal. Most importantly, it requires us to listen to the voices of those who are currently without power, understand their needs, and tailor our solutions accordingly. The path ahead is challenging, but the rewards are immense. This session will explore strategies to promote integration of distributed renewable energy to close the energy access gap through enhanced policy, financing, technology, international cooperation, and potential for solar solutions. Let us be the generation that turns the tide, that ensures no one is left in the dark, and that brings the promise of universal energy access to every corner of the globe. We are honored to partner this session with Bloomberg Philanthropies. Bloomberg Philanthropies works to improve the lives of millions of people in more than 700 cities and 150 countries. Bloomberg supports countries in expanding energy access and building economies around clean energy. This session is being moderated by Priya Shankar, India Director, Climate and Environment Program from Bloomberg Philanthropies. I'm sure her stewardship will help us to galvanize the views of our panelists in the most efficient manner. Thank you.
Thank you. Can we have a round of applause for Sabha, please? Thank you for setting the context, giving us an overview as to what this session will entail. Before we go on to invite our panelists, it's my pleasure to request on stage, amongst of course everyone putting their hands together, Mr. B.S. Bhalla, Secretary, Ministry of New and Renewable Energy, Government of India, for the keynote address. We can keep the applause going for a bit longer, it doesn't hurt, it's right after lunch and it gets the energy going just in the right direction. Mr. Bhalla.
Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you're enjoying the International Solar Festival till now. I see we still have to fill up some spaces here in the hall, but I'm sure people are finishing the lunch and joining. We have a very eminent panel for this session. I think they're going to start that, but I think I've been requested to give a keynote before the panel starts. I just want to outline that it is actually a very, it's a delight that, what we had been planning for a long time for International Solar Festival to be organized by the ISA for the first time. That day has dawned, and you saw the beginning in the morning. I'm sure you participated in some session, in the morning sessions as well. So I extend, on my behalf and on behalf of Government of India, I extend a very warm welcome to each of you. Your presence here signifies your commitment to learning something new and participating in some way in sustainable energy solutions. And I think that's the main focus of our entire today festival. What we want to do is, as was mentioned in the morning, ISA has 100 countries. We have 19 countries which are yet to ratify, but they've signed the framework agreement. So we have 119 members in that way, which is quite a large number compared to where we started from 2. Right in the beginning was India and France together decided to promote this organization. But now that we've achieved a milestone, 100 number of members, permanent members, of course 19 are, we hope that those also ratify the agreement very soon and become full members. But we have a large number of members. We still have some way to go. But I think we are on that task, and ISA is working towards that as well. Ladies and gentlemen, the challenge of providing universal energy access is not just a matter of electrification. It is a fundamental issue that intersects with every aspect of global energy transition. Unless we make rapid strides in delivering reliable, sustainable, and affordable energy to all. And if you recall, the Honorable Prime Minister in his address in the morning outlined these aspects as well. Our progress in other areas will inevitably be hindered. India has made ambitious commitments as part of our transitions towards clean energy. Our installed solar energy capacity, it was again mentioned in the morning, has increased an impressive 32 times in the last 10 years. We have achieved a number of 87 gigawatt of solar. And we were just about 2.5 in the beginning. You can imagine the kind of growth which has happened, and what has happened in solar is much more than what has happened in the wind sector in India. And I think it's quite similar across the globe. It's just because, of course, there are many reasons for that, but technology and the cost of how it has lowered the cost of technology for everybody to use. And that, I think, is the prime reason for this sudden expansion of solar energy. And of course, and that's what is going to take us to the ambitious level of what we intend to do. We are determined, India is determined to achieve 50% cumulative electric power installed capacity from non-fossil fuel sources by 2030. And many times I'm asked this, how confident are you? And actually I have so many reasons to say that I'm super confident. There are some naysayers, we will definitely hear some concerns, but these are concerns. There are always challenges in something, but looking at the entire thing in perspective, we are very confident that we should be able to achieve it. Solar energy in particular has emerged as the cornerstone of this transition, what India is doing, what the other countries are doing, with the potential to drive energy access, energy security, and a comprehensive energy transition. Based on the analysis presented by the International Solar Alliance, in the roadmap of solar energy for universal energy access last year, in fact during G20 presidency, we had spearheaded a few reports, and ISA had worked on this aspect for us. And from this report, which was published last year, released last year, it is clear that the solar-based solutions are indispensable in bridging the energy access gap. Approximately 59% of the unelectrified population, you heard the numbers several times today, can best be served through solar-based mini-grids, while decentralized renewable energy solutions can cater to the remaining needs. And that's our estimate. Of course, you can still go through the regular gates, but that, from what we estimate from the study which was done, it appears that these are the two aspects which can give the maximum coverage for the unreached population in the world. To achieve the universal energy access, we estimate that a total investment of about US dollar or 190 plus billion would be required. This includes about 97 billion for solar-based mini-grids, 18 billion for decentralized renewable energy solutions, and about 78 billion or so for the necessary grid extensions to make this possible. Additionally, to ensure the viability of these projects, financial support of around US dollar about $48 billion will be necessary to bridge the funding gap. So financing is important. We cannot, we may talk about technology, we may talk about our will to do it, our commitment to do it, but financing is going to play a key role when we attempt to do that. And it's not only in the developing nations, it's actually everywhere. So while the technology is available, we must address several challenges to sustainably scale up these solutions. It is essential to create an enabling environment for private sector participation and to encourage local entrepreneurship in energy access projects. I was just talking to a friend from Africa 50, Shralin, and he was mentioning about how India is becoming successful and is a model for some nations to follow. And the reason is that we have been able to create an environment. I mean, if I'm asked, what is India doing to achieve that 500 gigawatt, what would be your investment? Our investment is not going to be in a specific projects. We have long moved away from that mode of investment in renewable energy projects. We did have to do it in the beginning when we had to start the ecosystem. We did have to show that it is not only doable on a pilot project, it is also doable in a commercial project on a bigger level where the government investment was needed. But we moved away from that. And when we talk about investment, when we say this much of investment is needed, largely it is private investment, whether it is in transmission, whether it is in renewable energy projects, and whether it is in any other ecosystem manufacturing. And just look at the entire value chain and you'll try that. Actually, we are looking at when we calculate our total investment need for India, for example, we estimate that we'll need about 30 lakh crore or $400 billion roughly for in our quest for reaching 500 gigawatt of renewable energy capacity. And we're talking about, and most of it is going to be needed by the private sector. So it's very important that the ecosystem comes up, which allows the private sector to get funding and therefore be able to implement commercially based projects. However, in regions with significant energy access deficits, the financial risks are high, leading to increased project costs. And to bridge the gap between consumer affordability and supplier viability, we must implement innovative risk mitigation measures and provide concessional financing. These steps are crucial for attracting the private sector investment and ensuring the scalability and sustainability of energy access initiatives. Another critical challenge in energy access deficit regions is the lack of technical and financial expertise needed to drive electrification efforts. We must invest in skill development, access to global best practices, and programs that support sectoral entrepreneurs. Training, capacity building, and awareness creation are vital for long-term progress in these areas. Today, solar energy is not only contributing to large-scale energy generation, but is also empowering rural communities with clean and reliable energy solutions. Through strong policy emphasis and private sector support, we have brought clean and affordable energy to homes, villages, and communities across the nation that were once underserved. The International Solar Alliance, and we are very proud to be a founding member of this organization, it is playing a pivotal role in advancing India's vision of equity and growth for the Global South by facilitating partnerships between developed and developing nations, and through knowledge exchange, capacity building programs, and innovative financing mechanisms. The ISA is helping to unlock solar potential across the globe. India's youth are at the forefront of our journey towards a greener future. Through scaling job creation and inclusive education opportunities, we are empowering our youth to join the green workforce. Similarly, solar initiatives have significantly improved women's health and economic prospects, particularly in rural areas, by creating opportunities for entrepreneurship and employment in the renewable energy sector. In fact, we are right now working on different studies on not only the employment, overall employment in the sector, but also gender-based. What are the, how much of employment is there if you divide it between genders, and that's very important for us as we go forward in our scale that we want to achieve. Community-led solar initiatives under the Government of India's flagship programs have empowered local communities by granting them ownership and control over energy resources. These initiatives have fostered self-reliance and sustainability, placing energy decision-making in the hands of rural India. The widespread adoption of solar energy in India has catalyzed the growth of what we call solar enterprises, and there's so many of them. It's actually mushrooming, and if you travel across the landscape of entire India, you'll see how such enterprises are taking shape across the nation. Our supportive policy environment has nurtured a vibrant ecosystem of small and medium energy companies, which are redefining the energy landscape with innovative solutions. And the private sector is playing a crucial role in leveraging innovative financing mechanisms and public-private partnerships to accelerate the solar revolution. We recognize the urgent need for a collective global effort to solarize the world's energy needs. This International Solar Festival, the first, will further stimulate global efforts toward a cleaner and more equitable energy transition. India remains committed to leading this charge, ensuring that energy transition is equitable, inclusive, and just, so that all countries have access to the technologies and resources they need to succeed. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Can we have a louder round of applause for Mr. Bhalla, please? And sir, we will request you to please stay with us on stage. As I invite our moderator for the session, Priya Shankar, India Director, Climate and Environment Program, Bloomberg. Can we hear it for her? Our panelists for the discussion, Eduardo Avila, Executive Director at Revolu Solar and Coordinator at the Brazilian Association of Solar Energy. Ladies and gentlemen. Elaine Eboiza, CEO Africa 50. Anurabha Ghosh, Climate Expert and CEO of CEEW. Joshua Wycliffe, COO ISA. So ladies and gentlemen, it's my task to make sure that the room is full of energy, smiles, and the energy right now is over here, so it's not working for me. Can we please put our hands together loudly? Thank you, because this is an important moment right here before we go on towards the panel discussion. I will be requesting everyone on stage if they can kindly help us launch a report, the title of which is Global Perspectives on Rooftop Solar Energy. Can we have the report on stage? Can I request everyone to kindly stand up? It is a deep dive on how leading economies advance rooftop solar energy adoption. I will also request the team to kindly join us here on stage for this perfect opportunity and a photo op, and I will request everyone to kindly join in by putting their hands together. Thank you very much everyone on stage, and with that we go back to Bridging the Gap, Solar for Universal Energy Access in collaboration with Bloomberg Philanthropies, and I will be handing over the session of course to our session chair, Priya Shankar, if you can kindly take the conversation forward.
Thank you. And we have heard a lot of excellent context from Secretary Bhalla's speech and also before from Sabha, so I'm going to drive straight into some questions. Arnaba, congratulations to the CEW team on the launch of this fantastic report, Global Perspectives on Rooftop Solar Energy. What are some of the insights that have been learned from the lessons of other countries' experiences? It feels that rooftop solar has so much potential, but so far has been comparatively less tapped into. And what do we think we learned from what's needed now to drive the sector forward?
Sure. Thank you, Priya, and thank you for partnering with us on both on the report and the session, and of course many thanks to Secretary Bhalla, not just for his remarks right now, but for provoking us to do this study in the first place. Before I answer the question, I think it's important to go back to this issue of energy access that the theme of this session is, and what Secretary Bhalla also said. Between 2017 and 2019, the 18-month period when the Saubhagya scheme ran in India for electrifying the last households, we basically managed, one way to look at it is, India delivered access to electricity to about 10,000 human beings every hour for 1.5 years, non-stop, right? That's all right. We should applaud, but there are still well over 700 million people without access to electricity. It means starting today, 5th of September, until 31st of December 2030, the 6 years and 4 months that we have, pull out your calculators, we as a global community has to deliver access to electricity for about 13,000 human beings every hour for 6 years plus. So this is a gargantuan effort that we all have to invest in, which is where the role of distributed energy becomes so important. And that is why this study that was just released, where we look at we looked at top 10 countries, but the data was from 9 countries, both from the developing world and the developed world, of where they have managed to drive distributed renewables at scale and at pace. And some of the learnings is that, of course, we have to draw on, first of all, building consensus across policymakers, because this is not just an energy sector vertical. It is about how distributed energy helps with agriculture, it helps with community services, it helps with healthcare, with education, and it improves livelihoods. So that's one way to look at it. The second is that demand creation is absolutely critical, especially for consumer engagement. Utility scale is different, right? Where you're looking at macro scale demand. For distributed energy, you have to look at community scale demand. And unless you're able to estimate that, and you do that in various different ways, the role of consumer awareness platforms, so that within the community, the neighbor tells the neighbor tells the neighbor. The role of online platforms, so you can share this information very quickly, and of course, innovative business models. The third learning is they're going to leverage certain bespoke policy levers. And we see this, whether it is in the form of feed-in tariffs and subsidies, or such as in Germany or Japan or Australia, whether it is into sort of low-interest credit schemes such as in Brazil, I'm sure we'll hear more about that, whether it is in terms of rural poverty alleviation programs that China has driven. You need bespoke solutions on the financing side. Further, you need regulatory interventions, especially to do with metering, whether it's net metering, net billing, virtual net metering. Without that regulatory framework, the ecosystem does not seem as attractive. And finally, you need ease of implementation. At the end of the day, a large project being built out in a desert, the number of players dealing with it is few. You've got one project developer, maybe an EPC contractor, etc. They figure it out. Here, the ecosystem and the ease of implementation is different. You might have 500 different households. You're going to engage with them more efficiently. Imagine it this way. We are not solar proselytizers, we are just the household. How easy or difficult would we want the deployment of rooftop solar on our own homes? And unless we speed that up, the access to the credit, the access to the implementation, the after-sales service, the maintenance of the system, If we can start looking at these in a concrete way, then distributed energy can be built out faster, generate more jobs, and get us closer to those 30,000 human beings we've got to electrify every hour.
Thanks, Arnab. I think a lot on the potential of distributed solar and also the importance in terms of not just meeting energy access needs, but the employment opportunities, well-being, clean air, livelihoods that it generates. And also, of course, we haven't talked about this so much so far, but it also has huge potential in terms of climate mitigation and avoiding the worst impacts of climate change and meeting the goals of the Paris Agreement. Elaine, I would like to turn to you now. Secretary Bhalla talked about the importance of innovative financial risk-taking mechanisms. Arnaba also mentioned how finance is key to unlocking some of this. We know that there's been challenge in finance flowing to solar in Africa and other developing countries, but in particular, even more so to distributed solar. And what do you think some of the risks that are perceived by the financial community are, and what are some of the ways to address those risks?
Well, thank you very much. First of all, I'd like to thank the ISA, International Solar Alliance, for inviting Africa 50 to be participating in this event. It's a very important event. I indeed acknowledge that we have a massive challenge. And as I mentioned earlier to Secretary Bara, I think the example of India in terms of how this country was able to drive the penetration of renewable solar energy is really something that we in Africa, we are trying to learn to adapt it to our continent. I represent Africa 50, which is an infrastructure investment manager in Africa, which is owned by 32 African countries, the African Development Bank and 2 central banks. But we have an exclusive mandate to help bridge the infrastructure and energy gap through private investment and PPPs. So we are almost like a commercial entity which happens to be owned by government shareholders. Now, we've done quite a bit, certainly not enough in investing in large-scale utility scale solar project, grid connected. We've done 400 megawatt solar in Egypt, etc. But where we have seen a bigger challenge is actually in distributed renewable energy, distributed solar energy. And we do believe, like you were mentioning, Secretary Bara, earlier, that in order to achieve universal access, you need both grid connected, but also distributed renewable energy. And it's quite important. Some of the challenges that we've seen on the continent in Africa in distributed renewable energy, distributed solar energies, are some of the things that you mentioned earlier, Arunaba, in your remarks. I'd like to focus on the appropriate type of financing which is available to fund those projects. First of all, you need some early stage project development, project preparation, money available to make those projects bankable so that investors will feel comfortable coming and investing in those projects. And you also need, in my opinion, blended financing, both commercial money and also concessional capital or even grant schemes that will provide incentive to private investors to come in and invest in those solar mini-grids and off-grid solutions. You do need guarantees to mitigate some of the risks that the private sector doesn't want or is not able to take. It's totally okay to allocate the risk to the parties which are the best able to manage those risks. The private sector knows how to take some risk, and then some of the other risks the private sector doesn't want to take. So that's why I'm so very thrilled by the fact that the International Alliance has announced the Global Solar Facility and the Africa Solar Facility, which is one of the tools that, in my opinion, will help drive additional solar distributed renewable energy investments in Africa. And Africa 50 is very pleased to have been selected as to enter into exclusive negotiation with the ISA to try to be the fund manager for this facility, because we need these kind of solutions. We need an ecosystem, we need regulatory framework, etc. But we also need lower cost, blended financing costs to try to drive the penetration of solar energy in Africa.
Thank you, Elaine, and a good analysis in terms of the need for the role of innovation and blended facilities and project preparation to really drive progress on the ground. Eduardo, we have been hearing a lot about India's successes with solar. Another country that's been incredibly successful with solar energy development is Brazil. Could you tell us a bit about the Brazilian experience with solar energy development and what lessons emerge for other countries from this?
Yeah, sure. Is it working? Yeah. So first of all, as my colleagues, I want to thank a lot ISA and Bloomberg Philanthropies for the invitation. It's my first time in India. I'm really happy to be here. And I just came from Intersolar South America, which is the biggest solar energy event in Brazil. And we had 60,000 of people in São Paulo got together to discuss this. And we have created the social impacts and communities areas to discuss strategies to make it more affordable. And I'm here representing not only Revolve Solar, which is a nonprofit that I'm going to talk in the second stage, but also Brazilian Association of Solar Energy. And we have lived a solar revolution in the last decade. Last year we installed 16 gigawatts. We were third in global addition of solar energy, just behind China and US. And 60% of this is distributed. It's mostly in residential. I think one of the key elements is the regulation. We have a national regulation since 2012 in Brazil. We have the financing low interest rates as well, but this is focused on big, large projects. We still have a big gap on financing distributed solar energy in Brazil. It has been happening, but we have reached 4% of Brazilian population with distributed solar, which are the richest that have the initial capital to invest in this. So solar has been gone from 0% in the electric matrix in Brazil to the second largest source, just behind hydro, and the projections are to become the first one until 2050. So, but we still live a very severe energy poverty crisis in Brazil. We depend on hydropower, which has social and environmental impacts and is very vulnerable to climate change. So in Brazil, until we have 99% of the population connected to the grid, but 1% is 1 million people are in the Amazon region, and we are going to host COP30 next year. And in the state of Pará are the most of those families without access to electricity. Something we have to think. I agree to Aruna provocation on how we can give access to 700 million people until 2030. And Brazil has one specific challenge on that is to provide to 1 million people in the Amazon region until the COP30. So we have a lot of initiatives in Brazil that potentialize this social transformation power of solar energy. Federal government has the Light for All program that has used grid extension, but now focusing on off-grid with mini-grids and individual solar installations to provide access to almost 20 million people in the last 2 decades in Brazil. And we have civil societies initiatives as well as Revolve Solar that I'm going to talk more in the next talk. But yeah, we're living a solar revolution in Brazil due to regulations and financing, but we need to make it to reach the low-income population that are 90% of Brazilian population that live the energy crisis.
Thanks, Eduardo, for sharing some of the enabling policy environment factors in Brazil that have made this increase in solar and distributed solar possible, but also some of the challenges that remain in terms of access and electrification, which sometimes we think is kind of limited to certain countries, but actually is a challenge across a much, much larger number as well in terms of if we look beyond access to regularity of supply and other issues. Eduardo mentioned the Brazil G20 and COP coming up. and international cooperation plays a really important aspect. Joshua, congratulations, first of all, on the Solar Festival, and thank you to ISA for its partnership. At the helm of this organization, which we've heard about with 119 international members, what are your experiences of how international cooperation can help bridge this gap for universal energy access?
Thank you, Priya. I'll take it from where we left with the other fellow panelists. Each one of them have put across very important packages of messages. I mean, since morning we've been hearing about this number, 733 million or something, that people do not have access, mostly in sub-Saharan Africa. So that's the first thing I'd like to place. And the figures that Arunabha was mentioning, and how we need to provide access solutions per hour, per day. To do that, we would require, in the next 6.5 years or so, 6 years and 4 months, was it? To do that, you would need 217,000 access solutions, construct so many, at the cost of about $127 billion. So that's the kind of money. So I'd like to just base my case around those figures. If that's the kind of money that needs to go to be able to provide access solutions to the figures that would otherwise, if we don't do, if we continue as we are, we would leave behind 633 million people around the world internationally without access to energy. And again, mostly in sub-Saharan Africa. So that's the situation, that's the trend as of now. So internationally, ISA's experience has been very unique in being able to draw attention to international organizations, to governments, and bringing industry and governments together to be able to provide solutions that will be lasting, number one. Number two, taking it further, be it finance, so that I'm going to give succinct 2 or 3 examples. So access comes through also policy. When I said industry and governments need to get together, the first thing that when I say industry, you talk about investors. So there are countries that ISA works with, especially small island development states, where the supplier, who the supplier is a state-owned entity, happens to be also be the regulator. So how on earth would you find competition? How on earth would you find international investors coming when the supplier is the regulator as well, and the supplier being the state-owned entity? So ISA deals with such situation where we work to try and convince the government functionaries, the policy mechanisms and the policy makers, to convince them that their Energy Act, for instance, requires to be relooked at, to be reviewed. Recently, one of the ministers who spoke at a Solar X function said our Energy Act is being diagnosed. So that kind of clinical approach helps, because then the policy is more investor friendly. Because when you're looking at 217,000 solutions, that's a lot to be done in a very short time, which means we require pace and speed. And how we get to do that is, number one, through, of course, policy. Second, again, is through constructive finances, how we look at financing. And my friend Alain spoke about blended finance mechanisms. ISA has that in its armory, so we've already done that. We've launched at least one sample project. My colleague Pragya has done that successfully in DR Congo. We're looking at the second project to take off very soon. So with such facilities, yes, but we need many more such facilities to flood the market to be able to meet our targets, 2030 targets. So I spoke about policy, I spoke about finance. The next most important thing, and I was talking to Priya over coffee yesterday, one of those things that's had virtually a lot of catches the attention of investors, multilateral banks, is being able to show a clear marquee project on the ground to attract investors, and a project that would be inclusive of all these that we speak. We speak about a mechanism, financial mechanism, the financial viability, the policy viability of a project. I'm going to give an access example. So in Fiji, recently we went in and we saw the situation there. We looked at social housing, public rental boards, and we saw how families had only about power for 60, each individual apartment had power for only 60% of the time. The power outage used to be so acute. And also, even for that 60% of the power they used, they struggled to pay their bills, because that was the lower end of the social spectrum. So this was an ideal opportunity to look at. Look at the power of advocacy. And advocacy comes through tangible, marquee projects that you show on the ground. Donors aren't coming and throwing money into something they cannot touch and feel. So what we just did was, we looked at that one particular block. I didn't even speak about the whole estate. One particular block of 72 apartments. Looked at a universal access program through mini-grids. Provided a mini-grid solution through just doing the assessment. The assessment alone brought some very critical figures and the needs of that particular block within that estate. So he said, putting up something like this would save so many dollars, stop the outage issues that they had, and provide. And so by showing the savings, cost savings that we had, we were able to show the assessment report and release it to the government, show to the government, this is what you would save and this is what people would save. Believe me, within 2 months, this news traveled like fire. The UNDP stepped in and said they will do 9 communities. They didn't even have a tangible project. All they had was a report. I came back talking to my colleagues. I just said, look, if this is the power of just a report to prove, just imagine if when we have the mini-grid project on site, which hopefully in the next 6 months we should, the kind of powerful advocacy message it will generate. If you need speed, ladies and gentlemen, this is one major thing that needs to happen, marquee projects. Out of the 27 projects that ISA was given, 21 having completed, both across Africa and the Pacific. You know, we've known in the Pacific small island states where surgeons have been doing surgery using the torchlight of a mobile phone, emergency surgeries. One such health center, ISA has completely transformed through solar power. So now they have consistent power, they could conduct electricity under lights. So these success stories mean a lot. The next thing I'm about to say is, when an investor comes, an investor not only looks at the availability of the feasibility and the return on investment, but also the viability of the project in terms of in-country capacity in being able to maintain the facilities, maintain the equipment, the technology and systems they put in place. So most of these countries that ISA deals with, and the sub-Saharan Africa has been talking about, has challenges with being able to have the capacity to maintain these equipments, provide standard equipment. The other day last week I was talking in Africa, I was speaking there. One of those things I said is, if you look at pharmaceuticals, when they speak, they don't not only talk about their brand in pharmacy, that particular drug itself, because when the drug does well, your brand also automatically does well. If the drug isn't doing well, and if the drug is not familiar enough with the physicians, then the prescriptions go down, and then the brand also starts doing worse. So the same goes with it. If we promote renewables, we promote solar, then there are cheap products and brands, where they come from. They flood the market. And if these technologies fail, then people's confidence on solar fails. So what is important is being able to ensure that the standard of those equipments are maintained wherever we put those equipments in place. So we have what we call, the DG was mentioning this morning, the STAR centers, which has done very, very well. And again, it's gone into some of these most difficult, challenging spots on earth. And one of those I'd like to give as an example. The team lead who manages the Star Sea Center, Sabah Kalam, who opened this, he's been so successful in taking this to every nook and corner where it's the most challenging. I'll give an example of Somalia. I accompanied the team to meet with the minister and to be able to put it in place. We could not leave the hotel. The hotel room was attached to the airport. We could not leave the hotel room other than for our meetings without an escort. So in the morning we wanted to go to see the minister. Every 100 to 200 meters we had a checkpost. And every other block was had bullet-ridden walls. I'm saying this just to kind of give the impetus on how much that country has been facing in terms of the challenges. Yet today, if you look at the star of the Stasi centers, Somalia's Stasi center is the best in the entire. So countries, and when the governments and industries come together, access through education, capacity buildings, so easy, and that attracts investment as well. So let me stop here. I can see you lift the mic.
Thanks, Joshua. And a really good example there of the need to bring different stakeholders together and all of the experiences of the ISA in doing so. Secretary Bhalla, thank you so much for your fantastic keynote address earlier. We have been hearing a lot about how India has been so successful with its renewable energy development, especially with solar. And I have two questions for you actually that I'm going to ask at the same time, if that's okay. The first is on what are some of the lessons from India's experience that you think other countries can take on? And the second is that we heard this morning about the PM Surya Ghar Muft Bijli Yojana and all the exciting developments that are happening on rooftop solar. What is your take on how that's going and how plans for that are moving forward?
Okay, thank you. Let me join the panel discussion. Thanks for your question. But one thing I kind of partly answered when I was giving my keynote is, we have made, initially we had to do a lot of investments on our own. We had to do pilots, we even had to fund commercial projects. A little bit, some directly, some through the CPSUs and the private public sector enterprises. But then I think we focused on the frameworks. And India's economy being what it is and the way it has been growing, we had a fundamental advantage in one way because there was growth, there was funds looking for good investment opportunities. We had a framework which was kind of being made. But I think the biggest, if you see how it happened, and you see the history of India's renewable energy growth, the biggest push happened, I think, of course, one of the launch of the national solar mission in 2010. See, wind sector has been there for the last 40 years. I think the first windmill came in India in 83 or so. And we've had wind turbines being added. But I think the biggest push came was the change to solar. Kind of focus on solar. One was the national solar mission when a target was set. And I think, again, I would say that multiplied significantly in the 2015 announcement, when the Honorable Prime Minister only upscaled the target from 20 gigawatt to 100 gigawatt. And I think I remember, I was never in that sector earlier. So, but I do remember reading about it at that time. And I was also surprised at the target. But to see how it actually changed the way how the sector developed in India. So it's a combination of, and in fact from 100, we set up, we went to another target of 175 and now it's 500 gigawatts. So we've not stopped at a particular target just by announcing it and say, okay, let's wait to get it and then we'll announce. But I think we know at the pace that we're growing and whether we can achieve it, and that itself has led to the ecosystem. So a combination of all these factors is what I think is unique how India has done. I know not everything can be replicated across geographies, across nations, but I think there are some of these lessons. I think that's why it's important for us, for example, ISA, I don't know whether it was mentioned in any session till now or not. Recently, in the last 6-8 months or so, a little more, Cuba, how ISA has helped Cuba, which is otherwise supposed to be a very closed country. But they wanted to implement solar solutions on a bidding basis, because on a competitive basis, and ISA has helped Cuba do it, and they have been quite successful in the initial kind of projects which have been bid up. And now they're very, very gung-ho about expanding further. Similarly, I think there will be many closed sort of quote unquote closed economies, or where we think funding is an issue. I think we can try to, some of these things have to be done to create the ecosystem. On PM Suryaghar, I know we're closing on the session time, but PM Suryaghar I think is again a revolutionary scheme. I mean, again, a huge target set for us, 10 million. And I must give you an example of, in the last 8 or 9 years, we had the phase 1 rooftop program, we had the phase 2 program, and when the phase 2 program was extended, the time period has been extended. But in the middle of that, we've come out with a much grander program. And in the entire phase 1 and phase 2 program of rooftop solar, I'm talking about overall rooftop, in residential sector, we added about 700,000, about 800,000 rooftop. We covered 800,000 households we covered in about 8 or 9 years. And now we have come up with a target of doing 10 million. And we want to do it in 3 years. And 3 years is again something that we have to struggle to get an extended period. Otherwise, the government wanted it to be done in a year. But of course, we know 1 year was difficult, but target is 3 years. And if you look at the numbers, we already registered, and we have a technology has been used very significantly in this. And again, that is going to be a game changer. We have a national portal where anybody can apply. It's all automatic. Technical feasibility has been waived completely. I think other than one DISCOM, everybody has notified it by now. Even the load increase, suppose you have a 3 kilowatts, you want to install 5 kilowatt. That 3 to 5 normally required a separate process. That has been automated in the sense that it's automatic approval. There may be some little, fees to be paid, but that is done at the end. So a lot of procedural improvements have been made in doing this. And apart from that, there's some other technology, a lot of technology we are employing to educate the consumers. If you go on our portal and you click on, you enter your address, it takes you to your house roof. You have the option of looking at the GIS map, and it takes you to the roof of your house. And we've done it for entire India. Entire India is live, and there you can adjust the mouse a little bit just to make sure that you click on it and say, okay, this is my roof. You click on it, and in many cities already we have the data. It tells you what your 12-month consumption was, and therefore this is the kind of rooftop solution you need. This is the kind of size you need. And not only that, where we have done drone imagery, which now is being carried out for an entire country, gradually in steps. It even tells you where to place it on your roof. It does the shadow analysis and give that suggestion to you. So we are trying to involve technology. We're trying to improve the procedure. We have tied up funding. Funding is through our portal itself. You click on it and it takes you to another portal where all the banks are linked. We've tied up, sort of concessional financing for 3 kilowatt households. And therefore, so we're trying to use not only technology, easier procedures, better implementation, more faith in the process, which wasn't there earlier. So it's a faceless exercise, where you really don't have to go anywhere, except for maybe the last payment of when the technical, when the installation is done, then it is inspected and approved by the DISCOM. So we're trying to use these solutions to make it happen, and I think it's going to be we are also learning the process itself. A lot of skill development has to take place, vendor development has to take place, manufacturing is to take place. We have the cell and module which are made in India to be used for, because it's a subsidized kind of subsidy, and we are going to track every module made in India. We have a portal already functional, and that is going to be interlinked to our national portal, so that anybody just clicks on enters the serial number of the panel and it will confirm to you whether it is made in India, by whom, by when was it made. And we are also integrating the warranty, which for 25 years, which the manufacturer is supposed to give, link it to the consumer. So the consumer has it in their profile, his or her profile, and they can download it and keep it if they want. So that's the kind of technology we are trying to interlink, of course, with the easier procedures to make it all happen. That I think is going to be interesting for us.
Thank you so much. I think it's just incredible, the sophistication in both the technologies as well as the ambition. And I think that's the big lesson is not to be shy of ambition, to kind of have these big goals, and then we're able to get towards them. I am going to ask one more question of all the panelists. And that question is going to be, if you had to choose top 3 actions to take now to accelerate the revolution in distributed rooftop solar and in terms of bridging the energy access gap, what would be those actions or recommendations from you? And I'm going to start with Eduardo.
Surprise. I was preparing my answer afterwards, but no. I mean, one of them that I was thinking about is South-South cooperation. We need international climate funding, financing from the North, but I think we can arrange the funding in collaboration through Brazil, India, South Africa, and other developing countries. The other ones I would bring from Revol Solar experience that I was planning to explain in this second talk is because we are trying to create a new social business model in Brazil based on solar for low-income population. A new market for this 90% of Brazilian and Latin Americans. We are showing that it's bankable. We have 4% of default rate for low-income population with solar installed locally, not utility size. So not only international collaboration, second action that we are doing is partnerships with private companies, energy companies in Brazil, governments, not just the national government, but local governments. We have local elections next month in Brazil. So we are bringing this agenda to the municipalities. I think that the cities can lead these transitions as well, something that we've not been talking a lot about here. We are talking about decentralized energy, and the cities are living this. And another one that I would say is linked with professional training, job training programs that national governments can improve. Not only actions to train the people, as we've been talking, but also to create data about the jobs. We have the raw data in Brazil that we have 1.3 million of jobs created in the last 10 years of solar, but we don't know which jobs are they, where, how. So I just saw an United States initiative that I think it's very interesting, the job census. And I think that more countries can replicate this initiative. And just to close, one initiative that we have in Brazil of these national partnerships are the obligatory investments counterparts to energy companies. They have to invest 1% of their investment to social projects. I think this can be replicated. We can integrate in this way solar with popular housing programs. We have now just won a victory in advocacy in Revol Solar in Brazil that we have included solar energy in the biggest national program of social housing in Brazil. 2 million low-income houses are going to receive in the next 3 years solar. Agriculture, schools. So yeah, I think there are a lot of opportunities. Brazil, India, G20, COP30, because I think we're not only talking about a solution of access and sustainable energy. We are talking about a new social and economic model for the world for the next decades and centuries that is community-based, that have the power to influence a lot of social and economic relations. As oil and big power plants have shaped the 20th century, I think solar can shape the 21st century. It's really a solar revolution.
Thank you. Very optimistic on the solar revolution, as I think we all are. Arnava?
Of course, I'm optimistic like Eduardo, but I'm just flipping on the other side. See, if we really wanted to scale this stuff up, rather than it just being cutesy, what are the biggest bottlenecks we got to deal with? Right? Joshua has highlighted one of those. How do we work not against, but with the utilities? Right? Because when we think about distributed energy, you say, but the utilities will oppose. Right? And I think some of the work that my colleagues at CW have done is designed utility-led business models for distributed renewables scaling up. And they can be, I think we had some, Neeraj, my colleague is here, we had titles like business model for the roofless, those who live in tower blocks. Business model for the creditless, those who live in shanty homes but don't have credit histories. Business models for all. But in all of this, we demonstrate that unit by unit, the utility actually saves money rather than loses revenue when it incorporates distributed energy solutions into its business models. I think if David and Goliath work together, that's better than this kind of slingshot game that we have going on. And the only ones who win is the fossil fuel industry in this process. The second thing I would go for is building on what Africa 50 is trying to do perhaps on the blend finance model. But how do we connect, Anita is here, I'm looking at her, how do we connect the institutional investors with end consumer financing? Because right now we are trying to leverage institutional investors for large scale solar projects. And that's necessary in and of itself. But the tens of millions of consumers and beneficiaries from the 200,000 odd projects that Joshua was referring to requires a connection of that large pool of institutional capital, literally in the trillions of dollars, that translate into the few thousands of dollars of individual loans. We haven't found that funneling mechanism, and I would suggest that we create, maybe ISA could create a working group just on converting the translation of institutional capital into end consumer financing. The last one, you said 3, I said 2.5 because Eduardo has already referred to it. It is certainly about South-South cooperation. Let's have a working group on no one's coming to help us. So how do we do it together? So Africa, South Asia, Southeast Asia, South America, we've got stuff to learn from each other. And a working group just focused on that in a dynamic way would help to do the first two, utility-led business models and institutional capital for end consumer financing.
Thank you both. I'm going to move along, but I'm also going to suggest that if somebody has already mentioned one of your points, because I've been told that we're running over time, if you want to just say one or two and keep it brief. Alain?
Yes, thank you. I actually gonna borrow from what Honorable Prime Minister Modi said earlier today. He said awareness, affordability, and availability. So awareness in terms of making sure that we build a consensus that distributed solar is important. That's actually quite useful. Availability through regulations and all of the things that some of my colleagues, fellow panelists have talked about, to make sure that solar power is actually available, that people who actually want to access it can actually do so. And then affordability, which is the last one, what we also discussed, many of us, in terms of all the schemes that were mentioned today, blended finance, concessional, etc. So awareness, availability, affordability. Thank you.
Thank you. Secretary Bhalla?
I think I already enunciated quite a bit. I think I'll pass it to Joshua.
Joshua?
I just said all that I wanted to, so thank you very much.
Well, thank you all very much. I think we've had a lot of insights on the importance of the enabling environment, the importance of the right policy frameworks, the importance of finance, both public and private, but perhaps also most importantly, the importance of engaging communities and involving communities and bringing this all together through international cooperation, through what Arnaba was mentioning, kind of hard-headed economic realities as well, and really looking at a new paradigm for socio-economic development and progress that's sustainable, meets the access gap, and helps countries develop while also preventing against climate change. With that, I'd like to thank the International Solar Alliance for their partnership in this festival, and also CEW for their collaboration on this session and on the report that's been released. Thanks Secretary Bhalla for joining us and honoring us with his presence, and thank all the stellar panelists who have brought such unique, insightful perspectives, and thank you all for being here as well and joining us for this session.
And thank you very much, Priya, for driving the conversation, bringing out the pertinent points. Can we have a round of applause for everyone, please? And I will be requesting Joshua if you could kindly hand over a memento to our esteemed dignitaries on the dais. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together as we acknowledge everyone here on stage. With a little more warmth. Thank you. Thank you. Of course, we'll get everyone in one frame, and thank you to the audience as well. They have been pretty generous in, of course, applauding. I'm not asking you again, but I'm genuinely appreciating the effort. Thank you. Well, with that, ladies and gentlemen, we will move on to our next session for the day, which is session 5, Shaping Tomorrow for Transformative Change. To set the context for this session, we'll have Onyo Izoba, Legal Specialist ISA. We'll take a moment for everyone to please settle down. I can see there's a lot of movement between the sessions as the panelists leave. And we have our next set of panelists joining us here. We'll request everyone else to kindly take their seats. I'll request Anya to please join us here to set the context.
Dada.
Oni will request you to please join us on stage.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Onyi Izoba, a specialist with the International Solar Alliance, and I am delighted to welcome all of you to this session on Shaping Tomorrow, Finance for Transformative Change. So flowing from the immediate preceding